Hi guys, today we're going to be talking about capital punishment and whether or not it's ethical or unethical. Charles Manson, sentenced to death on January 25th, 1971. Jeffrey Dahmer, sentenced to death on February 17th, 1992. Ted Bundy, sentenced to death in July of 1979. Charles Ray Hatcher, sentenced to death December 3rd, 1984. Do any of these names ring a bell? These are all men who were sentenced to death after being found guilty of at least one capital crime, and mainly they were all murder. So what has changed? Why is there any question of another sentence for murders that are committed today? If the death penalty was ethical then, why isn't it ethical now? It is important for everyone to hear both sides of the capital punishment argument because media outlets are often very one-sided on the information that they choose to share about the death penalty. I choose this topic because I believe the opinions and ideas formed by many people are simply the adoption of beliefs that the media has fed us, rather than the ones that are formed based on facts. It is important for you to hear the argument for capital punishment since the media is flooded with anti-capital punishment campaigns. So why is the death penalty ethical? Did you know that the death penalty is a less cruel form of punishment than the alternative life in prison without the possibility of parole? Did you know that the death penalty actually acts as a deterrent for others who may be capable of committing a capital crime? Did you know that the death penalty brings a form of justice to the families of the victims? Watson testifies that a person who is convicted of a capital crime and is sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole spends on average 29 years in a 6x6 cell until the day they die. Whereas a person who is convicted of a capital crime and sentenced to death spends on average only 13 years in a cell on death row, as reported by Maladen. If both sentences result in death, why prolong the death of an inmate by making them spend nearly 24 hours a day in a cell with little to no contact with human life until the day they die, since we know parole is never an option? Seems like a far greater form of cruel and unusual punishment than the death penalty to me. After discussing the drastic differences between the years spent behind bars for a prisoner sentenced to life and a prisoner sentenced to death, let's discuss the message that is sent loud and clear to society about committing capital crimes due to the death penalty. Ernest Van Den Haag, a professor at Fordham University who has studied the question of deterrence, reported that capital punishment is likely to deter more than other punishments because people fear death more than anything else. They fear most death deliberately inflicted by law and scheduled by courts. Therefore, whatever people fear most is likely to deter most. The threat of the death penalty may deter some murderers who may otherwise might not have been deterred, and surely the death penalty is the only penalty that could deter prisoners already serving a life sentence and tempted to kill a guard in the prison they're staying in. Joanna Shepard reported that each execution is associated with 3 fewer murders. The deterred murders include both crimes of passions and murders by inmates. She also reports that shorter waits on death row are associated with increased deterrence. For each 2 3/4 year deduction in the stay in death row, 1 more murder is deterred. So that's a total of 4 murders that can be deterred by simply using the death penalty as a form of punishment. Now that we've talked about how the death penalty is a less cruel form of punishment than life without parole and the deterrent effects it has, let's talk about the much-deserved justice it brings to the families of the victims. It is evident that there is no way to bring back a person who has been killed unfairly and unjustly, so it's important to bring some kind of justice to the person responsible for the sake of the victims' families. Fred Romano, father of Don Garvin, who was murdered by Stephen Howard Oken, said that the death penalty will not bring closure. Don will never be back. I'm not looking for closure. That's a bad misconception on the part of many people. I want Oken to die for the murder of Don. It is justice. It is not revenge. Don's mother, Vicky Romano, also added that the death penalty isn't revenge, it is the law. What about the family of the young mother who was rendered helpless and made watch as her baby was executed in 1991, who was then mutilated and killed herself? Robert Macy, District Attorney of Oklahoma City, said the killer should not lie in some prison with 3 meals a day, clean sheets, cable TV, family visits, and endless appeals. For justice to prevail, some killers just need to die. Deborah Hendricks, the mother of Tia Hendricks, who was murdered with her 2-year-old son and 10-year-old daughter by Karen Montgomery, said that she felt comforted knowing that Montgomery was going to be put to death. These families have had to bear the loss of a loved one or loved ones. Isn't it only fair to bring justice to these killers for the sake of the families that will never get to speak, see, or hug their loved ones again? Isn't the only ethical and just punishment in this situation the death penalty? The death penalty is not only a lesser form of cruel and unusual punishment than life without parole is, it also acts as a deterrent for anyone capable of committing a capital crime. And it most importantly serves justice to the victims' families that were left behind. The crime of murder has not changed since Charles Manson, Jeffrey Dahmer, Ted Bundy, and Charles Ray Hatcher, so why should the punishment for murder be any different now than it was then?